This is Ouija Boards and Midnight Margs, where a spirit board conversation sparked our spiritual evolution. I'm Shale.
And I'm Cheyenne. And each week we explore a world where there is much more than meets the eye. So pour yourself a drink and join us as we cheers to a witchin' good time.
Bow, 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 bow. Season 5 sounds. Big explosion, celebration, all the glory.
Yeah, the mattress Max.
Wait, what was that?
So come on down to Mattress Max.
I thought you said something about snacks, and I was equally excited.
Oh, that would have been better.
Welcome back, everyone. We have missed you so much. This feels like the longest time we've been apart from one another. I don't know that it actually is, but it feels like it. It just feels like it was a very long break. Maybe that was also because I was recovering from literal surgery and everything felt like it was slow and boring and awful. But we are here. We have landed. It is 2 nights before Samhain.
Wild.
So excited.
This
Best
year
time
was
of
one of it's funny because I feel like time. What is time?
It's not real anyway, so
very fake. But I feel like this was one of those years that I agree, like most of it, like through the summer felt like long. The beginning of this year felt ages, like multiple years passed.
Right.
In the beginning of this year. And then summer hit and it just like fast forwarded to the end.
Yeah, it does feel that way. It was like a very like
here.
toilet paper year that way.
That's great. I've never heard that before. That's amazing.
You haven't heard that saying where it's like, as life, what is it? Like life is like a toilet paper roll. Like the closer you get to the end, the faster it goes.
Here it goes.
It's quite morbid.
I'm like really a little depressing, but I'm not mad about it.
But it does make sense. It truly does. Like it feels like up until you're like adolescence, it feels like the longest period of your life. And then you get your midlife crisis and everything just goes in a blur.
Girl, for real. Also, it's just funny the way we talk about things like midlife crisis. You know how in your human brain we all just default to thinking that we're going to live 100 years? Like that's just your default number. No, your Saturn return is your first midlife crisis. Like your 30s are very potentially your midlife. Also kind of morbid. Go do some cardio today. Work out your heart and eat some green leafy vegetables.
Do some mobility training.
Writing for doctors has changed the way I do some things. But
also,
yeah, it's just funny.
We have some new changes that also contributed to the chaos of this summer. Our beloved Cheyenne is no longer in Colorado. I'm sure everyone saw my Instagram post and was like, oh my God, are they breaking up? Is this over? No, it is not. We are still coming to you just from afar, thankfully, because of this virtual environment we all live in. We can still keep podcasting together.
Exactly.
It's not like we haven't been doing that anyway, but.
Right. Yeah. So I'm in Arizona now. I am in Scottsdale, and honestly, I've been doing better than we all thought I would. So I'll take it.
She has not melted away.
I'm doing all right.
She's adapting and thriving.
We've met some people. I will say, here's my biggest Arizona complaint.
Lay it on me.
People do not drink coffee the way that I like to drink coffee here.
Iced?
Well, it's only chains.
Oh.
It's like just Starbucks, just Dutch Bros, just Dunkin', because they all do iced coffee well, which fine. I'm not going to pretend like I'm not. Oh, to be fair, I'm a Dutch Bros girl now that we've moved here, but I'm not going to pretend like I'm not a basic Starbucks bitch. But I love a coffee shop, and they are hard to find here. Like a small, cozy mom and pop coffee shop, because people aren't going and drinking hot coffee. So that's been my biggest struggle, is finding my cozy coffee shop vibes.
That is a very valid complaint though, because there is something about the vibe of a really cozy coffee shop that just feels a little like home, you know?
Yeah.
Like a home away from home.
However, there is, for all my Denver witches who are super, super sad when Book Bar closed this year in January, there is a book bar in downtown Phoenix that I have not gone to yet, but is very highly reviewed, and it is called First Draft. So
That's cute.
isn't that cute? It's a good name. So I'm
That
like,
is a really good name.
that's like it's a good setup. I'm assuming, I mean, they have beer and wine, obviously, but maybe they'll have coffee too. So I will report back because I know all of you are desperate to know where I'm getting my lattes here.
Absolutely. We're all on the edge of our seats. Speaking of
yeah,
beverages.
What you drinking?
Well, today I am drinking a margarita, obvious, because it's season 1 or episode 1 of season 5. So it feels like you can't start OBMM without a margarita. It feels like tradition at this point. But I'm drinking a little blood orange margarita because I wanted it to be the same color as like Halloween-y vibes.
Ooh,
So
I love that.
I'm drinking. What are you drinking?
I am drinking a Kirkland Signature pre-mixed Costco margarita.
Work with what you got.
Because
that is our vibe around here.
that is the vibe today.
Mine
That
was
is
also pre-mixed. I'm not fancy, so
I did put some cute little black salt around the rim to give us our midnight mag.
it is very cute.
Midnight Mags vibes. I don't know why I became Matt Damon for a second.
We got to get the episode 1 willies out, y'all. You're gonna hear
Yeah.
some like slip ups and stuff like that. We're coming at you real.
Coming at you real. No cap. That was disgusting. Edit that.
My favorite thing is to like mortify my husband with all the new hip lingo.
I mean, it's what the kids are saying.
During 2020, when he came home with toilet paper, because that was a thing, right? I was like, wow, that's such a hard flex. And he's like, what did you just say to me? And it's my favorite thing ever.
Oh, that's funny. I love that. Okay. Yeah. Well, there we go. We got our Marg vibes. Ooh.
Already a jumper.
I know. I don't know if, oh, God.
A double jumper.
Okay.
This
Everyone
duck
calm
is
down.
speaking.
So I'm still shoveling. No one be mad. Those were, I'm not cheating. This deck is bigger in size than my usual deck. And I think things are jumping because I'm just not very good at shuffling it. So
No, fair.
we're gonna actually set some intentions for the first season. We are drawing a card today. This is a very special deck. God damn it. She was fine until we started recording.
Telly coming in like a menace. Oh my gosh, your leggings are so tan. I literally thought you just showed me your butt.
That's funny. Yeah, they're like mustard yellow.
They show up very like close to your skin tone on line here.
That's very funny. I'm sorry. I am wearing.
I mean, I wouldn't have been upset. That would have been a great
Can
way to start the
confirm to the listeners that I am wearing pants today. I will only show you my butt if you consent to it previously. But, ooh, okay, maybe that's the one. This is hilarious. Okay.
I'm so excited.
No, it can be the one. This is so funny. Okay, so we're drawing today. I'm sorry, friends. I'm getting it together. Here I am. We're drawing from our Mystic Martian Oracle deck.
Shut up. Is that really what it's called? Oh my God, that's amazing.
In honor of aliens being real, which we already knew.
Duh. Yeah, like that's why no one was shocked. It was because we all knew.
Old news. In honor of the aliens, we are drawing from our Mystic Martian Oracle. This was a gift last season from Mandy, who is a dear listener of ours.
Oh, thank you, Mandy.
But this card is so funny. I'm gonna have to post a picture. It is not safe for work, this card that we have drawn. I will just let you know that.
This is such a great way to start the season. I'm so excited.
It is slutty in the best way. So we have drawn the Nagas.
Ooh.
Which are they represent lovers, erotica, and sensuality. And I'm gonna show Shale this card. And then we'll describe it to you.
Are those like leopard mermaids? Oh my God, there's so much going on.
Oh my God. Amazing. Okay, so this card, yeah, so it's a swirly pink and purple background. It is two from the waist up hominid creatures, a seemingly male and female, in front of a moon. They are about to make out. He has a man bun, very hot. She has beautiful, gigantic breasts that he is pinching one of currently. And then their bodies turn into snakes.
Oh, those are snakes?
Yeah, it's like Python.
Yeah, they look like mermaids to me.
So mermaid snake, slutty mermaid snake vibes. We're into it.
Leopard eels, that's what they
Okay,
are.
if we're talking about hot aliens though,
Oh no.
these ones arguably might be the hot ones. So let me find them.
I thought you were gonna go off on a hot alien tangent.
I mean, I want to desperately, but I've wasted people's time.
Holding back.
I have already wasted people's time this morning. And
also the background or the what do you call the backside of a tarot card?
oh yeah.
They very much have the vibe of, we were talking about it earlier, like very much have the vibe of like when you played solitaire in the late 90s and you could pick your own deck and they had like the very like geometric pixely designs. That's what it looks
It's almost kind of like it's like a Spencer's blacklight poster kind of vibe too.
Literally, yeah.
Like that's the move. So the Nagas, here we go. Ancient Hindu and Buddhist texts speak of the semi-divine serpent beings called Nagas. If I'm saying this incorrectly, somebody who knows Sanskrit, please correct me. Which is Sanskrit for serpent. The Nagas are described as powerful, very beautiful, and highly advanced snake reptoid beings that are advantageous to humans while also dangerously fearsome and temperamental if provoked. Ancient iconography depicts the Nagas with upper human faces and torsos and snake bodies from the waist down. Oh, okay. Nagas is male and Naginis is female. So I actually did know this. I like reading things and then having things click in your brain where I'm like, oh no, you did know about these guys. Some suggest the Nagas could be a human hybridized genotype from the Alpha Draconian race. We're going to have to do some alien research. Like the Alpha Draconians, Nagas have the capacity to shapeshift into a total human form. The Naga's full form is fourth dimensional and not visible to the average low third vibrational human sensory perception. We're too basic and dumb to see these hot snake aliens.
I feel like that's so like relevant to what is actually happening.
Oh, okay. It got interesting again. They're subterranean.
No, okay. I was on board. I am on board with aliens from outer space. I am not on board with aliens that live in caves beneath the soil. I can't get down with that.
Why is it creepier? I don't know.
I don't know, but it's terrifying.
So they prefer to mainly reside in the deep, dense oceanic waters or subterranean citadels away from human populations. They are highly protective of their private environments. Unlike the terraforming, walking, talking humanoids, Nagas are more comfortable inhabiting the subtle, sensual energy fields where they fluidly regenerate their inbuilt elixir of immortality from the depths of the ocean. Wild. Okay, so card meanings. Telluride's now crying at the door to get back in. So they represent Tantra, vitality, erotica, sensuality, sexual union, lovers, healthy lust, Kundalini, and desire. So
what is it saying about season 5?
It's going to be sexy.
Apparently it is.
5 is going to be sexy. How is season 5 going to be sexy? What's our theme? What are we talking about this year?
Our theme is like dark and spooky this season.
Dark and spooky is sexy. It's like dark romance vibes.
Yeah.
We are going to be sharing a lot more ghost stories with you. Some true crime, paranormal. We're going to be talking about death, the way we like to talk about death.
Yeah, that's a regular occurrence here on the platform.
And it's just going to be a real spooky time. I will say this season, as we have it planned now, is going to be our spookiest season yet.
Yes, and we're really leaning into like the dark side of the witch, I would say, like where the witch shows up in folklore and just having some fun with it. You know, 2 witches really looking at what this looks like throughout history and just exploring a little.
I'm so excited.
In the
It's gonna be
depths.
really fun. You are also going to be blessed with more episodes of Just Me and Shale talking your ears off about these really interesting stories. We have some really exciting guests for you planned too, but we've missed getting extra cozy. So we are doubling down on the campfire vibes, and you're going to want to sleep with a light on after a lot of these episodes.
And it actually means that we're doing like a bunch of research.
Yeah.
Like we're working for you this season, you know?
Look out when walls can talk.
Yeah, we're coming for you.
JK.
Yeah, like we could ever meet his level of production and
Yeah, Capricorn
amazingness.
standards are just beyond my human capabilities. But we love him. Shout out to Jeremy. He's back with a new season too. So head over.
I was actually, as you were talking about the Nagas being underwater, it was making me think of an episode he had dropped in this new season about where Atlantis could actually be.
Yeah,
So
that's a really cool story. I love stuff like that though. Like that, just I don't know, all of it. The Atlantis story is amazing. I mean, underground cave stories I'm into too. I like civilization stories. That sounds weird.
I like knowing that people exist somewhere that they shouldn't.
I like knowing that people existed somewhere weird and then they all got wiped out. Then I like looking at pictures of it.
That's so funny.
You know, I just like my trauma porn to be ancient. It's different.
Yeah, right.
Like
there's some like separation there.
Anyway,
it doesn't hit the same if it's like a civilization that just went away 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's not as
there's no mystery, there's no allure.
Then my empathy kicks in. not as adventurous. Okay, any other housekeeping notes we missed?
Yes.
Yes.
If you have not noticed, we have a glorious new logo to kick off season 5. Once again created by the amazing Latina Lucero. She is just phenomenal in everything that she does and has graced us with yet another beautiful work of art that we can't wait to plaster all over anywhere we can this
all
season.
Over forever. Yes, we love Latina. If you are not familiar with Latina, go back to season 4 and listen to our episode about folklore and reality meeting. It's a real spooky conversation, and Latina is just a delight and a half. So,
and has the best stories. My gosh, like I could sit and listen to Latina's stories for hours and hours and hours and never get tired of it.
Agreed. We have one other really exciting announcement to make too.
What is that?
We are going to make people do a little bit of work this season.
We are. I'm so excited. I love when people have to work.
I love giving everyone homework. So we're giving ourselves homework this season, and you are welcome to join us, I guess is a better way to say it. We are giving ourselves some homework and some guidance, and there will be a lot more information about this on our Instagram. So if you are not following us at Ouija boards and Midnight Margs, all spelled out on Instagram, that is where the community building is happening. That is where the IRL gatherings are happening. That's where all the good information is. So if you want to work your magic these next 13, 15 weeks, because there'll be a little break in there, in season 5 with us, we are going to be doing a weekly working that will change, and you will find it on the Instagram, all the information. And we're kicking it off with a very seasonally appropriate first
working. Yeah, so what it's called, it's going to be called the Weekly Working Challenge. And what kind of inspired this is we've heard from a lot of you in the coven of the same kind of a similar challenge that Cheyenne and I run into quite a bit, where it's like, you know, I struggle with my consistency in my workings, or I get uninspired, or life happens, right? Like, I don't know how much of a working that even Cheyenne and I have done over the summer because it's been chaotic AF, right? And so we got to thinking, you know, how can we help support not only ourselves in this, but our coven? And so then we came up with the OBMM Weekly Working Challenge. So it's going to be a hashtag that we all have online as well. And so to kick us off, and again, as Cheyenne mentioned, we'll have all of this online. So this is just kind of a teaser, but we are asking everyone to create an altar, whether it's a Samhain altar, a seasonal altar where you're just giving ode to the autumn, maybe coming into the winter time, or you want to give an ode to sacred death, whatever that looks like for you. And if you are feeling open to it, we can all share photos with one another. We'll have a whole collective space to support each other through this. So can't wait to see what you all come up with.
I know, I'm excited. I love seeing people's altars. It's
I do
such a intimate peek into somebody's practice and psyche, and I'm always grateful when you share stuff like that with us. So I'm excited to get back into the season, have a more regular practice with everyone, have some accountability buddies.
Accountability buddies.
Yeah. So find us on Instagram. We'll talk about it more. It's going to be really exciting and really fun and really easy. We're not, challenges you can do with things that are already in your home, things you already have, and it'll vary based on what we're talking about in each episode or what's upcoming, what time of year we're in. It's going to be
or what you all want to do as well. Like we're going to be doing some opportunities where you all can contribute to it. What I also love is that there's like such a spectrum of practitioners in our coven. So it can be a little bit of mentoring as well between one another. Like we're just really here to support each other as a network. So yeah. I'm excited.
And then we took a little bit of a break while I was moving over the summer, but the OBMM book coven is alive and well. So if you are interested in reading some witchy fiction and nonfiction with us this fall and winter, details on how to join the book coven are on our Instagram as well.
And it's such a cozy space. Like I love the book coven.
I'm going to show you my butt one more time and let the cat back in.
Please do.
This episode is brought to you by Sister Yarrow. Sister Yarrow is a gorgeous, handmade, and magical jewelry company located in the heart of the Rocky Mountains. Sister Yarrow pieces are not only witchy focused, but crafted and owned by a real-life witch herself. Our amazing OBMM coven can get their hands on their very own pieces that feature aspects of nature, including crystals, bones, herbs, and sometimes even snakeskin sheds by using the generous 15% off discount offered exclusively to Ouija Boards and Midnight Margs podcast listeners. Use the code MARGS15 for 15% off your entire order. Again, that code is MARGS15, MARGS15, for 15% off your entire order. A huge thank you to Sister Yarrow for sponsoring our podcast.
Okay, speaking of cats, now that we have gotten all of our season opener housekeeping out of the way, we are talking familiars today.
Familiars. You know what song has been stuck in my head since we decided to do this first episode?
Tell me.
Superstition by Ricky Martin.
That checks out.
Like it's just on a loop perpetually.
Permanently there. Taking up space.
Taking up space. My valuable brain cell is currently occupied.
Living rent free in your head, as the young kids say these days.
Oh, golly. This does have an old vibe, doesn't it? We are old. Officially, Shale has joined me in the decade of 30.
So. I have. I'm finally one of the 3-0ers.
Yeah, we are ancient and we are on our way to death. So, that's all right. It's fine.
There's that.
I'm not mad about it.
On our way to
familiars. Familiars. Let's talk about them. What are familiars? What even are they?
So a familiar is defined as more of like a conscious spirit that typically provides assistance to witches. They're usually seen as a witch's assistant of some kind, helping you in your workings, helping you on journeys, tend to
murdering your enemies.
That as well. They tend to have like a spiritual psychic connection in a lot of ways, helping you to pass through those thresholds. that our little human brains tend to struggle with once in a while. But they don't necessarily have to be just this predisposition to animals either. So we're going to dive into the whole concept of familiars, where they came from, and all of the things. Because it's really interesting, because when you think about today's kind of witchcraft practice, the concept of familiars is a little bit controversial in that it's not something that is inherent to witchcraft. Familiars are one of those things that was kind of imposed on witchcraft, which I find very fascinating. And like anything in this community, in this practice, right? If familiars are something that I just want to have this put on the table at the beginning, but if familiars are something that you feel connected to energetically or spiritually, that's completely fine. Like that is something you can incorporate into your practice, but that is kind of where the controversy comes into play, I guess, of the fact that this isn't something that's like natural to the practice. It was something that was kind of created. But there has been a reclaiming of it, similar to a lot of aspects of witchcraft, right? Where there's this reclaiming, there's this empowerment that comes from taking this back for ourselves. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into that piece of this for sure.
So we should probably talk about the most famous of familiars.
Is that Salem? Or is it like a real familiar?
We can definitely go on a Sabrina tangent always. But yes, it is. I mean, essentially, yes, it is Salem. It is Salem. It is Marie. It is the Black Cat.
The Black Cat.
Okay, yes. So to understand the history of Black Cats and witches, we're going to travel back in time.
I like that little sound effect.
Black cats have long been associated with superstitions, especially those related to witchcraft and the occult. Their dark fur and mesmerizing amber eyes have fueled tales of magic and mystery for centuries. But where did this begin? So to understand this history, we're in our time travel machine. We did it. To ancient Egypt. So ancient Egyptians were among the first to revere black cats. They believed these felines were sacred, embodying the power of the goddess Bastet, who is both a protector of the home and a warrior. So killing a black cat, even accidentally, was punishable by death in ancient Egypt, because black cats were a divine connection to Bastet herself. Isn't that cool?
Honestly, if anyone has had the honor and privilege of either having a black cat as a pet or just being able to interact with them, they do feel like they have this more like ethereal connection. Like you can totally see where a lot of the folklore comes from.
Yeah, cats are such an interesting creature in general.
They truly are.
I don't know if anybody watched that Netflix documentary about cats.
No, I heard what it was about and I like couldn't bring myself to watch it.
But cats essentially, even our like quote unquote domesticated cats, are not actually domesticated animals. Like we have not successfully domesticated the cat.
Yeah, because you could like turn them loose tomorrow and they'd go right back
She'll
to
be
being
fine.
feral.
Yeah. Telluride she'll just change. She'll go be more murderous than she is inside and she'll live a great life. But if you watch like behaviors of wild cats, behaviors of inside cats, and specifically in like their connection with humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
This cat is not here to serve you. This cat is like, this cat is not your dog. Hi, please don't bite. The case in point, this one is currently biting me while I am petting her and saying nice things about her. So yeah, cats are such an interesting just critter in general, because you are literally living with a wild animal in your home all the time.
And I do feel like for people who often don't seem to like cats, I do feel like, and I don't want to generalize, of course, because I like some people just don't vibe well with certain types of animals. I totally get that. But at the same time, it feels like people that don't seem to really like cats just have never really had the opportunity to really build a relationship with one. Because it is one of those where it's like, yes, they're not domesticated necessarily, but when you do have that special connection to a cat, like they're your life. Like they just become so important and special. And I don't know, like dogs unendlessly give you affection and loyalty, and that's a very special thing. But it's almost like when a cat also gives you that sort of deep love, you're just like, you feel like you made it like this big achievement of
Like a
connection
mutual
to the animal
respect
world.
thing. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
like, you're
exactly.
building an actual relationship.
Mhm.
They're very intelligent,
Yes.
and I love having them around. I will always have cats around for sure. Let's talk about, we'll broaden our lens. Sorry, I got excited about black cats.
That, I mean, makes sense.
Do you want to walk us through some of the more, just the history of the connection between witches and familiars and where that started?
Yeah, so Cheyenne kind of touched on the fact that familiars, like the concept of familiars, even if that's not the term that would have been used in ancient Egypt, is like a very ancient concept of just kind of our relationship to the natural world, right? Like that's a very ancestral thing that our ancestors always understood how to have that really like intimate spiritual connection with nature and with animals.
Yeah, most ancient cultures are very animistic.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But the actual term familiar and how it became connected to witches didn't actually show up until the witch trials in Europe. And it's actually very distinctly an English witch trials thing, which I find very fascinating, because when you think about the kind of modern pop culture, like witches just seem so intertwined with familiars, but it was really one kind of specialized location where that really occurred. Touching on the mass hysteria, unsurprisingly, the reason that a familiar came into being was because it was a way that people could accuse people of having a direct connection to the devil. Like it was a manifestation of a demon in an animal's body. And that's the way that the witch was able to interact directly with evil, right? And so there's actually this, I want to read kind of a passage from an article that I think really kind of encapsulates this really well. So the article is called Paltry Vermin, Cats, Meese, Toads, and Weasels, Witches, Familiars, and Human Animal Interactions in the English Witch Trials. So it's a very long title, but the author is Helen Parrish, and she writes that the presence of the familiar in witch trials is almost a uniquely English phenomenon, but is one that raises important questions about the nature and practitioners of witchcraft, the role of demons and the demonic in the actions of witches, and the challenge that witchcraft and familiars pose to traditional categorizations and assumptions around human and non-human interactions. The relationship between witch and devil was displayed in the contact between the human witch and the animal familiar, a relationship which in many respects presented a material embodiment of the demonic pact. The familiar acted a hybrid of learned demonological, say that 10 times fast, anxieties about human commerce with demons, and a popular culture and folklore that positioned animals, imps. So imp is another term that means kind of familiar or relationship to something like this, and fairies as intermediaries between humans and the numinous supernatural. Animal familiars made it possible to align well-articulated views about demonic magic with the broader range of practices and supernatural encounters associated with cunning men and women. Animal familiars, treated as pets and companions, were not innocent participants in the practice of witchcraft, but creatures with agency, demons in corporeal form, whose interactions with the witch were problematic both conceptually and practically. Familiars were evidence of the permeable boundary that existed between humans and animals, the presence of demonic ritual and blood feeding among practitioners of magic, the moral and theological depravity of witchcraft, and the transgression of nature that lay at the heart of the witch.
Dun, dun,
So
dun.
you can see just kind of how it was literally another, I mean, when you think about the witch trials, right, it was all based on BS, right? There was nothing that was really tangible when somebody was accused of being a witch. And how much more can you lean into this like concept of the mystical than somebody who can literally interact with an animal that is of this like elevated platform, right? It's not just like an animal that it just exists in their home. They can communicate, they can, you know, help you move through journeys, they can do all of these magical things and provide that assistance to the witch. And then, you know, the other layer that I kind of want to lay on this is the whole concept that witch trials are rooted in patriarchy, right? In that, how could a woman in particular, obviously pointing out the fact that men were very much accused of witches as well, but for the most part, witch trials really targeted women. And the fact that a woman was not capable of having power on her own. She must have some sort of assistant.
God forbid a woman be powerful without making a pact with the devil to get there.
Where this kind of shows up in the modern world, as I mentioned, is the fact that this can be a reclaiming of this practice. Something else I want to kind of point out as well is something that I actually learned from Mystical Dylan. So if people watch the Witch of Wanderlust YouTube channel, there's a really great video that they have on familiars that I stumbled across while I was doing some research. Something that they point out that I think is really interesting too is that demon comes from the word daemon in Greek, which literally just means spirit. So the word demon in and of itself was kind of this bastardization of the word spirit. And when you think about what a familiar is in its most basic form, is a way to interact with spirit through some sort of vessel, whether that be a black cat or whether it be a plant. It really reminds me of the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Like, that's the whole premise of her book. And as somebody who is a very talented writer, I really appreciate that she has this perspective of a lot of ideas that we have are conscious, right? They have their own energy.
Yeah, they decide. They invite you
decide to
work with
choose
them.
you, and you can decide whether or not you want to take that idea and run with it, or if it is better suited to somebody else that has the capacity, the time, the environment to like run with it in their own way, right? So I do think that's a really beautiful thing, but also bringing this back to like relationships with plants, because that's how I view everything. It's a similar kind of thing. When you think about the wise woman tradition of healing, for example, there's very much that perspective as well, as that you are not a healer. Everybody is their own healer. You are this like, not necessarily conduit, but you co-create.
You're a tool. Right?
Yeah. You are somebody that acts as more of like a guide to help somebody discover their own healing or work with plants in this co-creation reciprocal way to bring about their own healing. So it's not me as like this all-knowing expert, right? Like, that's not the end goal. You want to invoke that through somebody else. So yeah, it's very interesting. And I think very beautiful to think that we're not just these like all-knowing beings that make this stuff happen, right?
Yeah.
And along those lines too, and what I really like about the way that there's kind of a modern view on familiars is they're not something that you choose. So you can't like go up to your cat and say, hey, you're my familiar now. You're going to be like doing these workings with me. And I think that's like a really interesting distinction of the fact that like kind of separates a familiar from like just a typical animal. All animals have magical ability, if you think about it, right? Like, all animals have this like divine connection to the interconnectedness of nature, but they might not necessarily be a familiar. A familiar is more somebody that chooses you. It's like that conscious idea coming to you, like what Elizabeth Gilbert talks about, or a lot of things in this practice, right? We don't just go out and seek it. It's like you have a stone that calls to you because that's the stone that wants to work with you in this point of time, or a certain tree, like you have a connection with a really beautiful tree. You didn't go out and necessarily seek that. It was something that called to you and was like that connection that you needed at the time, right? Familiars very much work in the same way. So you can't just be like, oh, I want this cat, or I want my dragon to be my familiar. It's something that comes to you. And it's a matter of consent and a reciprocal relationship.
I think in that regard too, it's also, I think personally, like obviously everything we talk about comes with nuance here, but I also think a familiar contract, right? If an animal comes in and decides that they're going to assist you in this working, they're going to be a part of this energetic exchange, I also don't think that's a permanent bargain.
Right.
Like, sometimes they might come at like very specific times. They might show up in very specific times of your life based on what you're going through. You might have a familiar show up for one very specific type of magical working.
Right.
They never work with them again. Like, I think a lot of, which is why like we as humans, right? Like, we love our companion animals. That's like, we have that connection. We want to feel like, you want to feel that. Like, I want to feel like she knows what I'm talking about.
Right.
And while I think you can build great relationships with your animals, and Telluride like if I'm reading tarot, Telluride is in the room.
Same with
like,
Marie.
And like, she loves tarot, but she doesn't show up for everything either. So like her being a companion, she's like a coven member.
Right.
Like
Yes.
she's just, but I don't, she's being so dumb right now. I don't think anybody else is controlling this little brain in this wild little cat that's here. But I understand that desire, right? That like human desire for like, oh, this is my thing, she's mine. And you can still have a deep spiritual connection with your pets. But I think, yeah, that blurred line of like what a familiar actually is and how they interact with you magically. And again, this was something imposed on witchcraft, right? So your views on this might be completely different. But it's just an interesting thing to conceptualize too, because I think a lot of times you might have had familiar interactions that you may not have recognized as familiar interactions.
Right.
And that's just like fascinating to think back on too, of like when a certain animal has come into your life and impacted you and helped you either get through something or bring something to light. I would hazard a guess that we all have more experiences like that we're not like consciously always aware of.
Yeah, there was another YouTuber that I came across doing some research. Their name is Bonnie from I don't speak French, so help me, Cheyenne, but it's the C''EST. Is that Say? Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah.
Say Bon YouTube channel. And she has a really beautiful video on familiars as well. And she talks about the fact that it's kind of that awareness thing too. Like if you have a particular animal that you feel spiritually drawn to, particularly like wild animals, right? Like this is where it can be kind of hard to know whether or not it's a familiar. You just happen to have like an owl fly by, right? But she's like, if you pay attention to what you're thinking about at the time, or the rule of 3 can come into this a lot too. Like if you happen to take the same walk and, this owl shows up in the same way 3 times in a row and it happens to be around the same environment, maybe there's something to that. It could just very well be that the owl has a nest in that part of the trail, right? So you have to kind of use your intuition and your judgment as well. But that's what I think separates a familiar from a typical animal encounter as well, is like, what is that kind of more than coincidence aspect of this?
Yeah, it's and it's interesting you mentioned owls, and I think that brings up an important point too, because owls for me are a method by which I believe that my late grandpa Jerry communicates with me. He comes to me as birds, and more often than not, he comes to me as owls. I'm someone who's had maybe more owl encounters, especially in the daylight, than almost anybody I've ever met.
Right.
However, I know those are not familiar encounters for me. That is always very specifically a person, like a spiritual being coming, who's like already a part of my team, who I already have a connection with. That's just how he presents to me. And so it's interesting to like keep, like, your discernment matters in all of the ways, right? Like I have a strong spiritual connection to the elephant, as do a lot of people and a lot of cultures. But I was telling Shale before we started recording too, since moving here, I have a resident coyote who comes up to our bedroom window every single day at the same time. And my neighbors told me that they've never seen her before, that she didn't show up until I showed up. And
what are you, like, I'm curious too, like what energy do you feel, like what's on your mind when she shows up? Like, yeah, describe that to me.
Yeah, I believe, and so again, like, I don't necessarily know that this coyote is my familiar either, right? Like, I think she's a steward of the land that I am on. But that was something I very intentionally, the first day I got here, where we are in particular, I am right on the edge of the desert. So I live in a very wild place now.
That's like exciting in and of itself, that you're in like this threshold space, like
like literally I'm in the liminal space, like the desert is right there. I walk 2 minutes and I'm in the middle of the desert. And so when I got here, the energy that I feel in this space and in this house is very animist. It's very land, nature, spirit based. It feels very almost like fae-like in that sense, where I'm like, I know it's not spirits of the human dead.
Yeah. And the desert just holds like such mystical energy too.
Yeah. And so it's, I believe that she showed up after I like made my initial offerings, right? Like you give water here for sure.
Yeah.
But made a very intentional, brought in my guides, help welcome us to this space. And like, obviously we're all residing on stolen land, but making that land acknowledgement a part of my practice personally was really important to me when we first moved in. And I spent a lot of time, especially in that space out back, asking permission to be here, essentially. And that's when she started showing up.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
But it's just interesting the different ways that spirit does communicate. And I don't know, I mean, that's how I'm interpreting her presence. I think she's a guardian here, and she's making sure that like I'm honoring my commitment to like be a steward of this space as well.
Yeah. That gives me chills.
But let's talk about toads. Let's talk about other kinds of familiars.
Yeah. So I feel similar to you. And I don't know, because there's something about toads. Like I remember watching Harry Potter, and you know, Ron Weasley receives a toad as his familiar.
He has a rat. Neville Longbottom has a toad.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. And he kind of like shits on it, right? He's like, oh, I just got a toad. And I was like, I remember even as like a young kid being like, what the heck? Like toads are so amazing. Like I know Harry Potter has this beautiful freaking owl, but like, come on, like toads are so cool. And I've always just like, they bring this like childlike wonder to me. Like, I don't know what it is, but like, I immediately just get so excited when I see them. It can be like just a few. And I was telling Cheyenne before we recorded, the other night I was out on a walk with my dog, and this time of year in particular, I'm seeing a lot of them. And I was sending my husband just like being like a little kid where I'm like, oh, I've seen 2 toads tonight. No, 3, no 4, you know, and just like being like really excited about them. But it's really interesting because even just the other night, I remember as I was walking, thinking about the fact that like this time of year, as we're getting into August, like you can just feel energetically like the veil's getting thinner, right? And I know that there's like a thinning of the veil in the spring around Beltane, but it feels like this like expansive awakening where this feels like a turning inward, right? And it's like such a, I know I'm like using mystical in this episode, like a ridiculous amount, but there's no better way to describe it. Like there is something just so magical about the Samhain time of the year when the veil is thin. And I just feel like it's like this slow progression that you can feel it building up around this time of year. And I remember thinking about that where I'm like, I just am getting that feeling right now. And all of a sudden, all these toads are just showing up. And it just feels like that kind of connection for me. Or it feels like they show up when I'm just feeling like I'm questioning myself and my ability. And they're almost like this kind of like sense of like this little sign of empowerment in a way, which sounds wild because they're a toad, you know, but they're just such a special creature to me. So if I were to think about like a wild type of familiar, I feel like that's what it is. But also kind of diving into the black cat thing too. And I was thinking about this like as I was watching that video from Bonnie about like a magically inclined animal versus a familiar, because even though like we've just gone into this about like a household pet is typically not your familiar, the way that I met my black cat Marie was like a very fate-like type of a situation where, you know, I almost got this kind of impulsive desire where I was like, I really just feel like we need a cat in the family. And this whole thing kind of materialized within just like a couple of weeks. And so we kind of decided like, yeah, we want to get a cat. And then like just a few days later, I'm like scrolling and saw this ad for like an adoption event just randomly. And I was like, this is the one we have to go to. Like, there's just like this really strong feeling of this is where we need to meet this cat. And I just went in knowing like, I want a black cat, just period. Like, I wasn't even going to like look at other cats. Like that was just what I was going to get. And when we walked in, she was the first one I saw. Like there's this whole lineup of little cats in cages, you know, being adopted out. And she was like right in my vision immediately. And it was like this, I'm gonna get like emotional. Like I love her so much. But she
love her.
Was so amazing because like as soon as I took her out of her cage, she like nuzzled up and was like so friendly and snuggly and purry and like just immediate connection, right?
Yeah.
And she's interesting too because she always like feels like she's just always around. Like she's like the most social cat, and she's like very much like, for us though, like her people, like she doesn't really care about, she could give a shit less if anybody else walks in the house. She has no interest whatsoever, but she has this very strong connection to us. And she's somebody who always wants to be around when there's types of workings, you know, or like when I'm trying to do journey work or something, she wants to be like right in my lap. So it's like this really interesting dynamic. And it's like, I almost feel interested in asking her, like, would you want to be my familiar, you know, and like seeing if she's open to it versus like, but then there's that question of, or is she just like very magically inclined? I don't know, but there feels like something different about like the way in which we've met and like the serendipitousness of it and all of that, you know what I mean? That makes me kind of question whether she might be in that realm. I don't know.
Yeah, I love that. And I think cats too just have that, like, you can watch cats for hours. Like cats are such interesting animals, and they are so just in tune with their surroundings. And yeah, like Willie likes to be in the room because Willie is codependent. Willie is not in the room because she's like, oh, you're doing magic. Like, can I see what's going on?
Right.
Like Telluride wants to be in it. She wants to lay on the cards. She'll like rub against the deck. She'll pull cards.
Oh, that's so cute.
If you like fan cards out, Telluride will pick one.
Oh, I love that.
But again, it's like, is that her playing with me? Does she just think we're like having a game, or is she connecting to it deeper? I don't know. Are you magic? She's looking at me like, duh.
I'm so curious too, when this episode is live, I want all of you in the coven to tell us like what your familiar experiences are. If you practice with familiars. Again, this is something that seems to be kind of nebulous within the witchcraft community. So I'm curious who has familiar connections and who doesn't.
Yeah. And like, do you agree? Like, how do you view it? Because like Willie is my soul dog,
right?
Which is like different to me.
Right.
Like Willie feels like a part of me.
Mm-hmm.
And her and I have an ability to kind of communicate telepathically at times. But again, I think that's a testament to our relationship and not like any external being working through her.
Yeah. And especially with the concept of familiars being like imposed on witchcraft too, like it kind of makes me think of the conversations we've had with Sterling in the paranormal community, right? Of there was that whole experiment of people working to create Stephen the ghost, right?
Yeah.
And that this collective energy actually manifested
like
something.
Raised a conscious being. Yeah.
Yeah. So could something be similarly happening in the witchcraft space of people who practice with familiars, that maybe that wasn't something that existed before, but now does, or it opened up another aspect of working with the divine and the spiritual? I don't know. It's like fascinating to think about.
Well, and I think we should like pause and rewind just very briefly to talk about the role familiars played. Like we're talking about this in a more modern context too, of like how our connection and how we view this, but familiars played like a very pivotal role in the persecution of accused witches.
Mm-hmm.
If we were podcasting in the year 1560,
right. We would not have made it to season 5, first of all.
Shayla and I would not be here. And
right.
the fact that like we can have this conversation and like even have it in like silly kind of nuanced ways and take it in these different directions is, you know, a direct result of decades and centuries of persecution and patriarchy and murder. So, you know, again, like we talked about at the beginning, like familiars were alleged to be pacts witches were making with the devil, right? It was a gift. Right. It was a gift from Satan himself. And like, okay, daddy, I would like one. How come he's never come to me? Like, I just
love how we just went from this like very powerful space.
I'm
like,
sorry,
okay, daddy.
I am a criminal. I should not be allowed to speak.
Criminal
Behavior.
It's all about balance here on OBMM.
It's about balance. We are having margaritas.
Yeah, literally at 8 a.m. Come on.
It's fine. But like, how come everyone else is making pacts with the devil? Like, what am I doing wrong is my question. Like, why have I not been gifted? Anyway, so familiars were the companion you received in exchange for your soul, like your eternal soul, you swapped it. And so they would carry out your malevolent tasks, was what they were branded with, right? By the people outside of the know. So they would spy for you, they would curse your enemies, and they would aid and abet you in harmful magic. And so like the most common familiars depicted were like cats, dogs, bird, mice, like little small animals. Cats particularly associated with witches.
And rabbits too. Like rabbits tend to be like so connected to all of this.
So sweet.
I know. How did rabbits become like such an occult icon when they're like,
I know. Like rabbits are literally, they look like a child created them. Like
literally.
Like somebody, like they're not real. They're too cute. So, you know, many accused witches were then tortured, obviously, and forced to confess their familiars, which led to the execution of both the witches and their animal companions. So like the fear and association between familiars and witchcraft, like perpetuated for centuries, established this widespread superstition around like black cats in particular.
Well, I mean, even look at black cats today, like there's still such a fear of them.
Animal shelters will not adopt black cats in the month of October.
Right.
Like, because we as people suck so much. And people will take out their fear or like try to get their like Halloween kicks by torturing innocent fucking animals. And so the decline of witch trials kind of happened in the Enlightenment era. That's where we started taking a more rational scientific approach to our understanding of the natural world. And then the kind of the cultural view of familiars kind of shifted to be more superstitious, right? It's when those stories started turning from like historical relevance, narrative was rewritten both to protect the accusers,
right, and
make it seem less intense and awful. And then it started, you know, perpetuating more of the mythology, the folklore, and like the superstitions rather than like actual manifestations of witchcraft. So interpretation started to evolve, right?
Right. So I think
Can I tell you something funny really quick?
Yeah, of course.
I did ask ChatGPT to write us a script for this episode.
Did you? I almost did that today too.
Okay, but it's really cute. Because they gave us names, like different names.
Oh, really?
and it's, I mean, ChatGPT is cheesy as fuck when you ask it to do stuff like this.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't work. Like we could not read this script, but I want to read you some of them because it's fucking funny. So it's, hey there, witches and warlocks. Welcome to another bewitching episode of Ouija.
Oh my God.
Midnight Margs, the podcast. I'm your host, Mystic Mandy. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Enchanting Eric. And then Eric speaks up and he goes, hey, magical mavens, ready to dive into the hair-raising history of witch familiars? Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. You betcha, Eric. Witch familiars have been a part of our spellbinding world for centuries. Picture this, ancient civilizations where people believed animals had serious mystical mojo.
Oh God.
And it just goes on. And it's very
had a witchy podcast.
If Ken had a witchy podcast, that's what asking ChatGPT to write our podcast is like. So very funny. But it just made me laugh because I just saw Mystical Mandy pop up on my thing as I was scrolling through notes.
I love that. So I think it would be fun to kind of round out this episode by exploring some of the correspondences of certain types of familiars. So we've talked a lot about cats, right?
Yes.
And how they've been revered for their mystical ability. But it's really about their ability to also pass between worlds. Like they can literally be in our physical presence and somewhere else at the same time. Like they just have this crazy ability that way.
I don't think my karma is good enough to come back as a cat.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, that's like our goal. How do I come back in my next life?
How do I come back as a cat? And I'm just like, I know I'm not doing it. I'm not living as a human well enough to come back as a cat.
Cats are also known to be independent AF, right? And they look out for themselves first, always. Like that's just period. But what's really interesting about them as a familiar present is that they can help to invoke this within ourselves, how we can look to put ourselves first more often.
Self-care queens. I love it.
Yeah. And how they can be also sensitive to physical or to psychic ability, which makes them a natural assistant for journey work. and as well as like things like channeling, obviously, or spell work and rituals, but they have that ability to kind of take us to the next level. They're a force multiplier, if you will.
What's really interesting about that is I kind of like briefly talked about this earlier, but since Willie doesn't hear anymore. She's totally deaf. She's 13.
Oh, Willie.
But in like my mediumship work, in my spirit communication practice of the last year, and in talking to my teachers like Sterling, I've started like making telepathy a more intentional part of my relationship with both of my animals.
Yeah.
I encourage you to try this because it's actually very, very interesting, where I have had moments where I will call Willie in my head.
Yeah.
And it would take a couple of times and I imagine myself getting louder and louder and like burrowing it into her. And she will wake up from a dead sleep, like a snoring, running dead sleep, and like look at me immediately and come over. And it's like, it's not foolproof. It's not every time. And you have to have a close enough connection.
Well, it's a practice, right? Like you're working a muscle.
It's reciprocal, but there have been moments, like if I'm out on a walk and I need her to like leave, she doesn't hear leave it anymore, right? If she's like finding a piece of garbage on the ground or whatever,
right.
I say it in my head without giving her any cues on the leash, and she'll respond to it. So it's just really, I haven't tried it with Telluride because Telluride can hear me and she's a dick. So
well, it's kind of like defaulting to your first language, right? Like when you're trying to learn a second language and you can't think of a word you're trying to say, so you default back to like saying it in English and hope that they understand, right? I feel like that's similar. If Telly can hear you, you're going to want to default to that. It's easier than working this other muscle.
Get out of my head. I'm bored. Like go away. I'm busy. But like with Willie, where I especially do it, it's not usually to communicate like something I want her to do. Most of the time I'm just telling her that I love her and she's a good girl, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, you're so good. Like I need you to know that you're still good, even though you're not hearing me say that you're good all the time.
Oh my God, that's gonna make me cry.
Isn't it awful? I lost it. There was a moment where I was like,
so emotional to think about.
No, there was a day where I literally, and that's when I started talking to Sterling about this, because there was a day where I was like, oh my God, when did I tell Willie she was a good girl for the last time that she fucking heard me out loud?
Oh my God.
Right?
It's so sad.
So
I'm like actually tearing up. Wow.
It's hard. It's hard. I cry about this dog every single day of my life.
You can see why.
So it's fine. But yeah, it's really interesting the ways that this practice kind of shows up in my everyday mundane life too, right? Like I'm not always doing big magical workings. Sometimes I just want to like tell you you're good.
Right. Oh, that's so beautiful.
But
well,
sad old dog tangent.
But that was actually another one I had on my list of like dogs as familiars. Because also it's really interesting too, because like dogs have kind of this like dual way they show up. Like they're either known as like this symbol of like absolute positive energy and loyalty and all of that, but they're also like this energy of like protector, like strong will, that kind of a thing. But they also can help us to have that awareness of where we might be experiencing danger, and helping us to kind of hone in those energies. So it's like this like balancing of this beautiful, friendly connection to everything that's around us, but also having that like awareness and discernment at the same time, right? Because like dogs are that way too, where they like that saying of like, I don't trust people that a dog doesn't like, like I think that's where that really shows up. Another one that's really interesting.
I've broken up with people that Willie didn't.
Oh yeah. I would absolutely break up with people that Willie doesn't like.
I'm like, sorry.
Yeah. Another one that's interesting is bats, which I feel like are the dogs of the sky.
Fucking love bats.
So of course they have
Halloween.
Like I freaking love bats. Because they have like an affinity for everything nocturnal, everything about the night, right? And like how
we didn't talk about third nipples.
What?
I know that sounded like it wasn't relevant, but you talked about bats, and immediately in my brain,
like the witches' marks.
I thought vampire bats who are suckling blood, and so witches are alleged to have a third nipple. I don't know where mine is, so that's where they say that it's like somewhere on your body you're supposed to have a blood feeding nipple,
right?
And so that encouraged this mass hysteria. But bats made me think about sucking blood, which again is incorrect, because bats don't do that either.
Right.
Even the ones that eat blood don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So bats get a bad rap for sure.
Well, and then they're also connected to the moon cycle, right? Of like how we can invoke that energy into ourselves. And so like bats can be a familiar that really helps you to connect to that cyclical nature that witches are really familiar with.
Oh, I love that. Familiar with, LOL.
a
LOL.
And then the last one, I think that like, I mean, a familiar could be anything. It can be bugs, it can be ravens, it can be rabbits, like we talked about. But the other one that I think is really interesting is goats, because again, when you're thinking about like connection to the occult, goats just show up, which again is like such a fun, like funny animal, because like when you see goats in day-to-day life, they're just like chaotic as all get out, and
They're
they're
like
just
dumb little
goofy.
cartoons.
They
You're
literally
like, what
are.
are
Like
you
you don't even think they have a brain. So it's like how they became like this revered animal. I don't know. But
goats are like camels to me, where I'm like, who made you? Like who like what random body parts did you shove onto this animal that you were like, yeah, that one, put it out there?
But I think also where goats show up is because they have that connection to Pan, the nature god, right? And they just seem to be like this symbol of nature in and of itself, which again is interesting because like you would think a more like wild animal would embody that, but somehow
it is
this
interesting that when
domestic.
we talk about goats, we're thinking about domesticated goats.
Right. Yeah.
Or
like a mountain goat.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of like a little like Taylor Swift, I thought you were trouble, goat. Like
exactly.
I mean, their eyes are creepy. Goats have creepy eyes.
They do have
rectangular pupils. Might be a sign of the devil. I get it.
Honestly, yeah.
Checks out.
Checks
actually.
out. Well,
that's
I feel
not
like
fair. Horses have well, horses are probably connected to the devil too. Speaking as a former horse girl.
Yeah. Former horse girl?
That was
forever
dumb.
Horse girl.
I literally have a tiny horse figurine within reaching distance of me right now. Former horse girl.
Literally. I have like a drawing of a horse I did not that long ago, like right over here.
That's cute. I always doodle horses too. It's like the one thing I cared about learning how to draw.
Same, dude. Like that's all I draw is horses. I don't draw anything
funny.
else.
All right, we're just calling ourselves out left and right in this one.
Anyway, I think that's probably a good wrapping up point for our first episode of season 5.
I'm excited we're back. Feels
Me
good.
too.
Brushing off the cobwebs. Except we don't do that because spiders are our friends.
Yeah.
Brushing off the dust.
Which I literally had to do off of my microphone this morning, so that checks out.
That's how long it's been since we've hung out in the airwaves with you. All right, so that brings us to a very important question.
What is our perwitch and slip?
Our first perwitch and slip of season 5 as it relates to familiars. Your perwitch and slip is it's interesting because I want people to think about their relationship. I want you to think about how animal spirits have shown up in your life and in what moments they have come to you and how that has kind of helped you work things out. Or if you are someone who like me, right? I was obsessed with elephants for like ever. Love elephants. Elephants are great. But like if you were like one of those kids in high school, right? If like wolves were your animal as a kid, or you were like so obsessed with axolotls. I don't fucking know. But
that's a good one to be obsessed with though.
Like if you're gonna pick something.
They're little smiley, they literally have permanent smiles on their face. Like how can you
so
not?
cute.
They look like an emoji.
They're just like little happy little dudes all the time. But like when did that start for you? Like I would invite you to do some self-reflection of like why did this animal become the animal for me?
Yeah.
And then kind of unpack that and see where it might have a little bit of a deeper meaning for you. I don't know if that's a perwitch and slip. That's just what I want you to do.
Well, I think where that kind of plays in is like this whole concept that we've been talking about today of making the practice your own, right? Like I do think that's a theme in our perwitch and slips a lot, but I think in this context in particular of if familiars are something that calls to you and you feel that spiritual connection, go for it. If not, that's fine too. And yeah, see how this kind of shows up for you and take that time to explore.
Yeah. I love it. Perwitch and slip. Oh, here it is. Perwitch and slip to not, this sounds bad. I was gonna say to not take like full responsibility for all of your actions. Like you're responsible.
No, we like
for your
accountability on
actions.
this channel.
Like you are responsible for that, but maybe not full responsibility for your successes. Think back on how, like, I would encourage you, your permission slip is to celebrate the things and people who have helped you succeed.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
It's like, we are not the center of even our own universe.
Right.
So your permission slip is to humble yourself.
Yeah. Kicking off season 5. Be humble.
Be humble. That's the theme.
All right. Well, cheers to that.
Cheers, witches.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Ouija Boards and Midnight Marks. If you're having a witching good time, we hope you'll help us to grow this little coven. You all know it's us against AI in this algorithm world, so please help us out. Please like, rate, and subscribe anywhere you're listening to us. Also, we want to connect with our spooky Marg-loving friends out there, so please like and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Links for those profiles will be in the show notes. And hey, be sure to tell us what you're drinking tonight. We love you all so much, witches. Cheers.